What we do here matters, because what we don't do matters even more.
We need to continue to push, and we at ADAO are going to continue to push the Surgeon General of the United States.
As you know, the United States continues to use asbestos, and that indeed is a barrier to others stopping its use.
The most horrific part of this whole story is that it is preventable.
Hi, good afternoon. It is an honor to be presenting for ADAO, and I'm proud to be among such an amazing global organization, a dedicated, caring community, truly making a difference. My name is Tony Rich, and I'm an industrial hygienist employed in the arena of environmental consulting, mainly with duties as an active, licensed asbestos professional specializing in asbestos building inspections, surveys, and regulatory compliance concerns for clients. Over the past 19 years, I've taken part in thousands of asbestos surveys and abatement monitoring projects, from homes to high-rises, from shacks to skyscrapers, and practically everywhere in between, as well as work sites underground and even on the sea. The following historical images show examples of workers at a Johns Manville plant from the late 1940s, making a type of insulation material called magnesia. The first fellow was pitchforking asbestos into a vat, and the remaining photos show different aspects of that process. A great deal has been written about asbestos, as there are literally volumes upon volumes of information about various aspects of it, including, but not limited to, its very versatile physical properties, mining and processing, manufacturing, historical uses, and untold numbers of industrial, military, commercial, and consumer products, material handling and abatement regulations, medical studies, its harmful health effects, and the many ongoing legal affairs. Broad research into these matters reveals a tragedy on a global scale, literally centuries in the making, and you're left with an almost overwhelming sense that the tragic story of asbestos is like no other, a story that is still sadly being written. Entire industries, hundreds of corporations and companies were created dealing with asbestos. Many industrial nations relied heavily upon asbestos in thousands of products, once acclaiming it as Lady Asbestos and the magic mineral. Additionally, asbestos formerly was classified as a strategic material, and supplies were fought over in World War II. Consequently, asbestos was once touted as one of the world's most important and vital commodities. Indeed, very few materials, if any, could compare with asbestos on the overall scale of exploitation and subsequent influences on human civilization in the past, the present, and the future, especially in terms of economic, industrial, and human health impacts on societies across the globe. Over the course of time, hundreds of millions of tons of asbestos have been traded throughout the world, reaping many tens of billions of dollars in corporate revenues. In the US alone, the United States Geological Survey, the USGS, reports that well over 35 million short tons of raw asbestos were imported in the country between 1900 and 2003. 35 million tons are out there, the vast majority of which is still out there in countless products. Making matters worse, although asbestos is mistakenly believed by many to be completely banned in the US, considered a problem of the past, asbestos is still a legal ingredient in a long list of materials and products. A fact that's been repeated here several times today already. It's true. The USGS also reports that the US has imported over 6,000 short tons of asbestos in the last 5 years. Further, millions of metric tons of asbestos are still being mined worldwide and are in building materials and consumer products in many countries today. Tens, if not hundreds of billions of additional dollars will have been spent to cover costs associated with asbestos-related health care, testing and abatement, insurance claims, and legal issues. Tragically, in human costs, exposures to asbestos have injured and claimed hundreds of thousands of lives in the history of its usage, and is estimated to affect as many for decades to come, likely much of which could have been prevented, given that the numerous medical studies showed exposures to carcinogenic asbestos dust were dangerous since the early 20th century, and that substitutes for asbestos were also available. To reach such epic proportions, many asbestos-related issues have been largely underreported and seem to compound the fact that asbestos continues to play an overall detrimental role in the lives of people. Yet, despite the apparent magnitude of its relative significance in world affairs, asbestos still remains an often misunderstood material and continued potential threat. Mainstream knowledge about asbestos is relatively limited and can be seemingly as fuzzy as the mineral themselves. Tens of millions of tons of asbestos will require continual maintenance and still be present danger in our nation's homes, buildings, utility infrastructure, and maybe in building materials and consumer products right under our very noses. Well, it may depend on what is this ubiquitous material asbestos. It may depend on who is asked. Although an apparently uncomplicated term, there does seem to be as many descriptions and interpretation of what asbestos is as there are applications for its use. Research into characterizations by a variety of mass media news outlets and a plethora of internet sites about asbestos can yield varied and inconsistent results and even outright inaccurate information from source to source. Even some leading authorities tend to hesitate about an exact definition of asbestos. For example, the US CDC NIOSH organization appears to reconsider reevaluating the definition of asbestos from the so-called asbestos roadmap. But the current consensus among the majority of governmental regulatory entities in the US and worldwide seem to agree on a basic definition of asbestos as being a collective term used to represent a particular group of 6 naturally occurring fibrous or asbestiform silicate minerals, which exist in sufficient quantities and have been used commercially to exploit the mineral's unique properties. These 6 mineral types shown in ore form are here: chrysotile, historically known as white asbestos, the asbestiform variety of serpentine; amosite, which is itself a name derived from a mining locality known as the asbestos mines of South Africa, or Amosa; also historically known as brown asbestos, the asbestiform variety of Cummingtonite grunerite; chrysotile, historically known as blue asbestos, is the asbestiform variety of rebecite. You have tremolite asbestos, actinolite asbestos, and thophyllite asbestos. Those 6. One of the most important, most distinct features of asbestos is its fibrous nature or asbestiform habit. After rocky asbestos ore has been mined and processed, asbestos fibers collected from its host rock and graded according to fiber length, strength, and size, then packaged, and then shipped to manufacturing industries. Somewhat of a natural oddity, prior to the 19th century, asbestos has been described in myth and folklore as salamander's wool, or originating from the plant kingdom, or in more recent times as a paradox of nature, soft silky fibers born of rock. Raw asbestos fibers are easily separated from each other and appear to resemble cotton, wool, splintered wood, or flax-like to the unaided eye. The visible fibers of asbestos are actually bundles upon bundles of yet smaller bundles of individual microscopic crystal filaments known as fibrils. The scale of asbestos fibril is so minute, many times smaller than the width of a human hair. Its smallest diameter has only been measured with the aid of electron microscopes on the order of angstroms and nanometers, beyond the resolution of light microscopes. The asbestos fibril is the smallest natural fiber known and is practically as resilient as stone. In addition to the microscopic features, asbestos was used for numerous properties. And in fact, it was listed on a vintage asbestos advertisement. If you can read that. But it basically touts all the properties here: fire resistance, thermal resistance, high tensile strength, corrosion resistance, and on and on. Of the many properties of asbestos, these particular characteristics are the most fundamental aspects that may explain why asbestos has been so widely used in industry and at the same time also potentially harmful if inhaled. When added to other types of materials, the countless microscopic fibers exhibit their natural rock-like durability, but yet can be finely subdivided and dislodged and ultimately become airborne. Due to certain aerodynamic principles and very slow particle settling rates of tiny asbestos fibers, the toxic, odorless, invisible dust can remain airborne under certain air current conditions for long periods of time. The same microscopic particles can migrate under certain and then be breathed in, deposited deep within the lungs where they persist and do the most damage. So where is asbestos? A basic comprehension of what asbestos is and why it was used can provide a practical understanding to where asbestos was used, combined with the fact that asbestos was relatively inexpensive, abundant in nature, easily mined, and could be readily incorporated into a large array of host materials. Asbestos has found its way into nearly all aspects of life: on the job, at home, at school, where we worship, where we play, where we travel, on land, at sea, and even in space. And apparently, the use of asbestos extended into the afterlife, according to these products. After performing thousands of asbestos surveys and collecting tens of thousands of samples in the past 19 years, I believe the question of where asbestos can be found should be where can't asbestos be found. In my experience as an asbestos professional, I have yet to encounter a type of material or application that asbestos was not perhaps either in it, on it, under it, or somehow otherwise associated with it. When conducting an asbestos survey, at least through the eyes of an asbestos building inspector, the majority of building materials are generally considered suspect and thought of as guilty until proven innocent. Bulk samples of suspect materials are then collected by properly trained, certified, and licensed inspector and submitted to a reputable, accredited laboratory for specialized analyses. It should be noted that only certain laboratory microscopy methods, such as PLM, polarized light microscopy, or transmission electron microscopy, for example, are the only methods that can conclusively determine the presence or absence of asbestos in bulk materials. The most publicized list of asbestos-containing materials only scratched the surface of an otherwise complete list of materials that might contain asbestos. A mind-boggling list, too many to go into in the time allotted here. And practically everything but the kitchen sink, basically. It's a long list. Just keeps going. Well, actually, it's in the sink too. Kitchen sinks, bathroom sinks. ADAO has a campaign. It's called See for Yourself. Linda asked to show examples of asbestos products and conditions as part of an asbestos awareness campaign. And it's a very successful campaign. If a picture is worth 1,000 words, then these photos speak volumes. I recently added a close-up of the infamous Kent cigarette. That's the mouthpiece end, showing the chrysolite right in the very end. And as it's been stated a few times earlier, asbestos has not been completely banned in the U.S. Perhaps the misunderstandings regarding this may have to do with the 1989 U.S. EPA ban that was changed in 1991, and also by an attempt by the EPA to clarify which products remain banned and those which are not. Somewhat of a confusing list of certain clarifications that just seems to be quite confusing. But basically, a summary is provided that indicate only a few materials and applications are actually banned. Asbestos continues to be a public health problem and require constant, diligent monitoring. Frequent headlines in the news exemplify this. During my inspections, survey after survey, damaged asbestos materials are routinely encountered. How can we protect ourselves? There are many laws, which I will defer to my colleague Tom Lobenthal. We'll get into the main regulations. But basically, I would encourage everyone to become involved and take action, honor our asbestos victims, and advocate for asbestos awareness. Thank you.